Okay, welcome to Forthright's Ask the Expert event. I'm Kristen from Forthright. We've assembled a fantastic panel of end user computing experts to answer your questions today. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions at registration. There were a lot. We may not be able to get to all of them in the next hour, but we will follow up with you if we aren't able to get to your question. So one way or the other, you'll get the answer to your question. But if you have questions at any point during this webinar, please type your questions in the chat box or use the raise hand icon. We'd like this to be interactive if you have a comment or question about the answer that the panelists are giving. And let's see, next slide. So I just want to thank everyone for being here on behalf of our sponsors. Everyone is getting Grubhub credit for a free lunch, courtesy of iGel and ControlUp. And then courtesy of Citrix, we're giving away 3 raffle prizes, which you'll get to announce 3 winners at the end of the webinar, and then you'll get to pick one of these cool prizes. So here are our panelists today. I'd like to introduce Steve Zoberg from Forthright and Robert Pate from Forthright, as well as Matt McKinnon, who's going to be our moderator. He's also from Forthright. And then joining the Forthright team is John Hare from ControlUp, Ron Nair from iGel, and Avelio Garcia from Citrix. So I'm going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, starting with Avelio.
Well, welcome everyone. Avelio Garcia, as obviously you can read on the screen. I've been here at Citrix for going over 12 years now, held a bunch of different technical roles throughout. Today we're going to be discussing some of the newest capabilities and new features that we have to offer as it comes to our remote work strategy. Kristen, is by any chance, since he's wearing the perfect shirt for this, is John next?
Yes, he is.
Awesome.
So yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, my work from anywhere shirt. I try to live and lead that model for a long time too. So my name is John Hare. I'm with ControlUp. I run our channel program and work with our partners. And before this, I spent about over 25 years in the end user computing space. So I'm a technologist that has seen most of the technology that's enabled users and leveraged technologies like Citrix, iGel, and ControlUp over my career. So nice to meet everybody.
Okay, and next up is Ron, and I realize I have the wrong web addresses. I am so sorry. That is my fault. But Ron, you're next from iGel.
Okay, I was like, hey, I'm logging VSI. Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. That was my mistake.
No worries, no worries. It's all good. So yeah, hey all, Ron there. I'm out of Austin, Texas. I'm with iGel and basically work with our channel partners and our MSPs to help them when they move Windows into the data center or the cloud using Citrix and analytics from ControlUp. It just makes sense not to keep running Windows on the endpoint. You convert those endpoints to be iGel hardened Linux read-only system, nice and secure, and don't spend time having to secure or manage those endpoints. iGel takes care of it all and keeps it very simple. All right,
Great.
Thanks.
And Steve?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Let me start there. We received some great questions today for this Ask the Expert session, and I can tell you that it's going to be very informative. I'm Steve Zoberg, as Kristen introduced me, Chief Operating Officer at Forthright. And for those of you who have joined us but haven't worked with us before, I'm going to give you a very quick, less than 2-minute intro so you can better understand our expertise and kind of where we fit into this picture. Forthright's been helping clients optimize their application delivery literally for decades, and we've been a Citrix partner since 1995. So for us, it's more than just the tools and the technology, but it's how do you supercharge your end user experiences? How do you make it so it's literally a pleasure to work and work using these technologies? So we've built a practice around being user-centric in everything we do. And what that means is that our passion, our focus is not necessarily centered around what specific tools or products or processes that are optimal for us as a consultant, but rather we put ourselves in your shoes, who actually have to deal with the technology, deal with the users on a day-to-day basis, and we pay very close attention to the experience and the outcomes of your end user population and how our solutions actually impact that. And essentially, we want to be able to empower your desired IT and business related outcomes, right? What those goals are. So it's not a coincidence that many of the questions that we receive for this session are actually related to user experience. It's quite interesting to do these. If you look at our next slide, we have 6 core services that focus on delivering consistent and exceptional user experiences. And so if you're interested in finding out more about any of these, hit us up. You can call our office or send an email to success@forthright.com, and we would love to chat with you about it. Now, for today's session, joining our panel of EUC experts, we have a very knowledgeable list of colleagues here and vendors. And what's really interesting about it, especially coming from our perspective, is the fact that these vendors really work well together. They focus on integration and optimizing their products to work together. And we'll talk about that a little bit today. And of course, what does that do? Well, that drives fantastic outcomes for you, our clients. So I want to welcome and thank Avelio from Citrix and John from ControlUp and Ron from iGel from joining us today, and an additional Forthrighter, Robert Pate, who I've had the personal pleasure and honor of working with this gentleman for over 17 years on a whole wide range of projects, but mostly EUC projects. So you are in excellent hands today. There's no doubt that we have a great panel, so I want to ask you to sit back, enjoy the banter, and I'm going to hand the conversation back to Kristen so we can kick off our session. Thanks, Kristen.
Okay, great. So we're going to jump right into the questions. Matt, go ahead and take it away.
Oh, you're muted.
Can't hear you, Matt. Uh-oh.
Oh.
That's weird.
Matt, you might have a microphone that's not the one that's in front of you.
Right. All right, well, while Matt figures out his microphone, I'll read the first question. So the first question is, what are end user computing best practices? And then kind of along the lines, what are some of the top app layering solutions on the market? So,
Hey, Kristen, I think I'll kick that one off. And good afternoon. Again, my name is Robert. Steve mentioned me earlier. It's a fairly loaded question for the first one, at least, in terms of best practices on the EUC space. But I'll try to explain on a sort of high level on how we approach this. And generally, it all starts with the apps and their use cases. And, it generally will be asking, you should be asking yourselves some of the following questions. One is, are the apps all SaaS based? Are they client based? Is it a mix of both? Is there a specific OS required for it? What are some of the backend requirements? Is the app that you're going to be delivering sensitive to latency? How taxing is that app? Or the apps that you're going to be delivering, are they going to be requiring GPUs or a large amount of memory, such as something like AutoCAD, or how often do the apps need to be updated? Do they require elevated access? And some of these things can lead in decisions whether or not the delivery platform is going to be persistent versus non-persistent, or multi-session versus single session. I'm sure a lot of a lot of you that are on this call, have been in those situations. And these are a lot of these decision points that have to be made during this process. Other questions, do you need specialized peripherals, redirections? Is there multiple monitors? What is the actual scope? How many total users and apps, and do they need to be isolated from each other? You should be asking yourself for security requirements around the apps. Do they, for the apps or just the environment in general? Do they need to be HIPAA or PCI compliant? Or what is the expected uptime around these apps? And is there a minimal performance SLA that you need to achieve for the business? So, a lot of these questions, once you start getting the answers, they're going to start narrowing down your focus, which is going to help you lead to the right set of solutions. So for example, some of the questions that I asked, like, let's say you had a line of business app which required minimal latency to the backend database servers. So that's where Citrix may be a great solution for that, because you'll be able to deliver in the same data center as far as where the backend is, and still have that great experience for the user. or maybe you want to ensure that you just have a consistent experience and making sure all the peripherals and redirections, they all function as expected. You want to remove fragmentation across all the endpoints that you're delivering, and that's where IGEL may come in, because with their ability to create a standardized deployments across all those thin clients and endpoints. And then around the SLAs, making sure that those are being met and that the users are getting the experience as promised to the business. That's where Control Up may come in and be able to kind of give those metrics and confirm and show that if there is sort of a performance impact that's creeping up, you can get that and be proactive with it. So, you'll see a lot of the questions that we're going to be answering throughout this webinar, how these solutions kind of come into that. As far as the second question around the top layering solutions, I think it really comes down to what's really best for your use case. Kind of as I mentioned before, you're going to be asking yourselves a lot of questions, but app layering in general also kind of fits in with application packaging, kind of being the same concept, where really one of the main goals, at least, is creating a separation between the management of the OS and then the actual application layers, and being able to reduce the number of base or template images, which in turn reduces your overall overhead. And it really comes down to deciding what's best for you. It comes from a number of factors, like what type of deployment it is a VDI, shared hosted, physical workstations, even the management requirements, like how often does the app actually need to be updated, how many applications you actually need to deliver, and some of the solutions can lead to like a full layering solution, such as Citrix App Layering, where you have multiple layers, that being the OS, the application, the platform layers. They're all managed separately, and then they're merged together and delivered through whatever mechanism that you're using to deliver your such as MCS or PBS. It could be a app packaging solution, such as Liquidware Flex App, where maybe you've already invested and you already have a delivery, you're delivering a desktop already, but you just want to introduce a new app, or you want to be able to manage an app separate from what's already delivered. That solution allows you to sort of package an app and deliver it via an agent. And then there's also these containerized solutions out there, something like one vendor, Numescent, where you sort of contain an app along with its required OS into in sort of a isolated capsule, as you will, and it could be delivered through an existing mechanism like MCIX, or and be run in an isolated modality. So,
and Robert, I think the other thing really on the end user computing best practices, you can think if you go back like 5 years ago or maybe even longer, and you were having discussions, people were asking us, hey, where's the best place to run email? I think we should continue running our own email servers, right? And I think nowadays you don't have that many customers or that discussion anymore about running your own email servers, right? You're either going to use Google or Microsoft, for example, to run your email. If all your data is sitting in Google or Microsoft, it just makes sense now to run your Windows and your Windows apps from there as well, using Citrix with the optimized display protocol, and IGEL, for example, convert those endpoints to be IGEL and connect into that, right? So that's kind of what we're seeing now, right?
If I can add one more comment from a business perspective, I think depending on the size of your environment, you might answer this question in a different way, because the panacea from an IT perspective, of course, is to leverage a single tool, have as few golden images as possible, right? And try to package, containerize, whatever technology you're going to use, have an application delivery strategy, push it all out the same way. There is a reality, though, especially in larger organizations where you have a very large application portfolio, that there is not a one-size-fits-all scenario. So that's the first thing that's key. And we have some customers that will leverage multiple tools, because the truth is, while they're all excellent, they're great at different areas and different ways of delivering it. And of course, they may work better in certain applications than others. And so you don't always have to pick just one solution from that perspective. The other thing I would keep in mind that I've seen quite a bit is that you'll have a small subsection of your population that has a very specific requirement. And maybe it's 10, 15, 20% of your users, and you will base your entire architectural decision based on trying to fit that requirement into the list, right? And the truth is that you might want to address those particular users with that need separately, not make that decision across the board, because that seems to be the exception, right? And that's where all of a sudden leveraging more than just one solution or more than just one app layering technology might actually work, because you can separate those users and simplify it for everything else, because everything has a trade-off, right? And so that would be my my 2 cents on that question. It's a great question. It also is not something that's easily answered because it's very unique to each organization. So what you
So
really
many moving
do,
parts.
yeah, you want to conduct an
Steve,
assessment. Go ahead.
You mentioned something really key, right? Sometimes we do have these use cases where a certain, let's call it a very high importance group has a particular requirement, right? And so to your point, we kind of make it to where the entire organization is going to fit those requirements, and that might make it to where the project is no longer cost effective, right? And so with Citrix, one of the options that we're going to have is the ability of having the resources in different locations, right? Whether some of the data is super highly regulated and we want to keep that on-prem, or in a particular cloud container, to call it that way, we could certainly do that, right? So we'll be able to mix and match different public clouds and different resource locations in general, right? To be able to fit those needs. And certainly to your point, right, from an app layering perspective, Citrix has one, right? It is a good app layering solution, but it might not be what makes it the most optimal for each deployment type, to your previous point there.
I'll add one last small comment to that, which is this is not easy, right? This is complex. And so a lot of the answers that we will give you are going to be, it depends. I think the point I like to get across on that standpoint is the fact that these solutions are very flexible. You have the ability to get more users into a virtualized environment, or provide them the end user experience that they desire, right? And having insight into what's going on into that environment and understanding how to properly architect that is really important. So I know that we have a lot of what ifs on there, but I think that's where a partner like Forthright is going to be very value added when they have a stack of solutions to be able to provide their end customers and say, hey, let's look at your environment, let's understand what you're trying to accomplish, what your goals are, and then let's put the right solutions in place to match your needs, right?
So Matt, we can't hear you if you're.
You may want to
I
dial
can't
in or
hear
something.
Matt.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go to the next question. Sorry, Matt. Okay, so the next one is, what are your latest security capabilities? Oh, what's going on? Can't hear you.
Everything.
Oh,
Probably dropped
sorry,
off
go
to
ahead.
reconnect, maybe.
Yeah.
Now we can't hear Avelio? What the heck?
Oh, fantastic.
This is great.
Ah.
Now you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Everything's happening, obviously, as expected when we're live. Everything is happening right now. So I'm back. That was quick. From a Citrix standpoint, right? What are your latest security capabilities? There's definitely a lot to cover. We've been coming out with new enhancements from a security perspective to existing features, as well as new products altogether, right? So we have. And it might be just my LinkedIn, but I feel like it's everywhere out there. There's so much conversations around ZTNA, right? Replacing VPNs. And so we also have a solution out there for that. I wanted to quickly bring it up to everyone's attention so we could have further breakout sessions and conversations. Definitely reach out to the Forthright team so that those conversations can be kicked off. Today, aside from kind of quickly bringing those into your attention, I wanted to focus more on the apps and desktop solutions that we have in play. And there's quite a bit of enhancements that we've been doing recently, starting off with, for example, the adaptive authentication service. And what this enables us is to provide contextual access, right? Apply different types of authentication policies and different types of authentication access once determined, basically, right, any set of criteria that you're looking to identify. So we can, for example, say we don't want to enforce MFA if the user's sitting inside of the brick and mortar, right? If they're in the office, let's not make them go through MFA. And that's one of the simple configurations that we could do, right? But we can also take that in the opposite direction, where it is, hey, this user is coming in from home, they're coming in from an unknown device, maybe not even untrusted, just unknown. It's never connected before. We know nothing about it. What could we do to scan it? What could we do to provide access to the end user into the environment, but not give them keys to the kingdom, right? So we could do things like enabling watermarking or restricting access into local drive mappings, right? So we'll be able to tap into all of the existing policy configurations, but do it in a dynamic fashion, depending on user, network, device, right? And be able to take on all of those different factors into account. In addition to that, right, Steve, you were going to mention something?
I thought you were going to pause. I was just going to say I love the whole dynamic feature set, because the truth is it speaks to the user experience, because most users, they kind of understand the need for added security, but they fight us every step of the way. And so, if you're on a random device or you're at a random location, people understand it, but often you hear, well, I'm at the office. You manage my machine already. There's a suite of stuff here. Why do I have to go through all these steps? Because you already know the device is safe. And so having that capability where you have a situational awareness in the technology, I think really makes the whole user experience far better. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
I am as well. I really liked when we had the feature on, well, NetScaler back in the day, right? Citrix ADC today, and it is a huge feature, right? We could take that very, very granularly and take it to a next level, right? Hey, what if they're on an iGel Thin client, or what if they're on and if they're on an iGel Thin client, it should be a trusted device, right? Because we know about it. But what if they're on a corporate validated device, and we can validate, say it's in the domain, or it has a particular SSL certificate, or it has a particular file hidden in some hidden folder that we can actually go and search for, right? We can have the system take care of that. So those are definitely going to be some of the key ones for end user authentication. And then we have Citrix Analytics for security, right? And on the security side, different from the performance, we're basically going to have an AI learning about the end user behavior. And based on that set behavior, right, the different patterns that they normally go through on a day-to-day, be able to then identify behaviors that are not common to that end user, right? Or just behaviors that we want to flag. And by doing so, we then create a risk score for the end user, which will enable us to go through predetermined configurations, right? This does need to be set up initially, but it can go from as basic as, hey, let's shadow this user, let's turn on session recording for them, all the way through to, we don't know why or who or what's going on, but this current session is doing too many wrong things. Let's go ahead and disable their AD account. So, from the very basic, let's not be intrusive, to let's start disconnecting network shares, to clipboard redirections, to completely disable the user altogether. So those are definitely some of the ones that I wanted to bring up for now.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the next question. I'm thinking Matt's still not here. What is the most consideration we should pay to endpoint security?
Use iGel. I mean, from an iGel endpoint, I mean, it's a read-only system. All the partitions are encrypted. When it boots, if something is compromised, those partitions won't come up. But basically, if there is an issue, it's basically reboot and you're good to go and manage there. From a Windows point of view, I'll let Control Up or someone else speak to that, or Steve.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, when you get into endpoint security, there's a lot of factors in there, right? I know that Avilio's probably got a few things to say around this too, because they can contextualize, where you're coming from. But From a control up standpoint, getting insight into that environment, right? Control up is not only a monitoring solution, but also a management tool. So providing you information about where those endpoints are coming from, what the last mile looks like on that endpoint, right? What SSID are they on? Are they coming from a secure location? Are they coming from a internally managed location, or are they sitting at a Starbucks, right? So Control Up can definitely provide you a lot of that information, both real time and historically too. And I think Avilio's probably got a lot more to say around what Citrix can provide around endpoint security too. So
certainly, Steve, I caught you also wanting to say something, so I'll give it to you. I'll give you the floor first.
Yeah, I was going to say two things. I mean, obviously for me, we deal with a lot of clients that have regulatory requirements they have to deal with. And then all of us obviously are under the constant threat of cyber attack. And it used to be much easier when everyone worked in an office and everything was in a data center and we controlled everything. And today we control nothing that is on the end user side. And I think that's a great aspect, because if you plan for this zero trust kind of concept, then all of a sudden you don't really have to worry about it. I don't really care what's on the end device. So to give you an example, beyond using Citrix technology and policies to prevent data from leaving your safe VDI environment and ending up on these remote devices, which is obviously one concern, to iGels, for example, whether it's terminals or even something like a UD Pocket, where you can send out a little USB stick and have computers literally boot from it. So a lot of companies will hire people. They're all over the country. They have BYOD devices. That's great. You know, either go to a secure website and log in, and we're going to use policies to lock you down, or even better, boot up from a secure iGel, iOS, and that way when you're done, you unplug it and go back to your own personal laptop. But there is no connection between when you're working in my secure session and whatever you got going on your personal device. And a lot of, there's software that I can deploy, but most people don't want that software deployed on their own personal device. And so we run into an interesting challenge here, because there's that thing of choice. People want to use their own devices. And honestly, it's better for a lot of corporations too, with workers being so transient these days. The last thing I want to do is have to send out a $1,500 to $2,000 laptop to every single new hire that may or may not choose to stay with me long term. Yeah, so listen,
Yeah.
I got one on my desk because
I was showing you my UD Pocket here as well. So basically that UD Pocket that Steve was mentioning is an iGel device. It's got iGel loaded on it, and basically for contractors, seasonal workers or whatever, instead of trying to figure out what their device is that they're going to use, give them a UD Pocket, they plug it in, they securely boot, and that's how they get into the environment. The UD Pocket can also be used, you can think of business continuity or DR, right? So for example, you may have gave someone a nice laptop, it's got iGel on it or whatever, but if that laptop breaks, what do they do? So for those higher availability, you could also give them a UD Pocket. They could plug it into their daughter's gaming PC at home, boot up, and continue to work while you send a new laptop or whatever to them to replace the one that's broken. So you have that high availability. You can get more of your 5 nines for your endpoints.
There's another interesting thing, and we've used this for migrations too, is yes, you can log in completely securely through a web page, right? I can use your existing machine and still be completely safe. But now I'm dependent on whatever your environment is, the state of your current laptop, whatever your, wow, there's an echo. Whatever your son or daughter might have put on it, because maybe they borrowed it. And we've seen a lot of organizations when they onboard new users and they keep the old machines and they don't refresh it. This avoids that, right? Because if you're booting off of that operating system, I don't really care what's going on. I don't care if your Windows has not been patched for a decade. It's completely irrelevant, because we're ignoring that. We're just using the hardware in an isolated environment. And again, it goes to speak to user experience, because a lot of times people have things going on their local device. And now with people working all over the place, whether you're in an office or not, I don't need to support Windows running on that local machine and whatever software you have that's running on that local machine, which will in fact impact your VDI performance. I mean, in theory it shouldn't, but it does. If your local processor is pegged at 100% because something's going on, or it's spitting out a ton of network information that it shouldn't, maybe it's sending packets or receiving packets because you have things running in the background, it's going to impact your session. So if I can log in with a UD Pocket and use the hardware and I know that session's clean, I'm going to deliver the very best and most secure experience. So there's definitely use cases because you can't get away from the local devices, but to me, that's something that's a big focus.
And we have a question kind of related to security. Nick asked if you guys envision AI one day evaluating and fixing a company's security levels.
It's actually already happening today to some degree. One, if you think about the Citrix technology, will actually proactively not just alert you, but can take action and impact your access based on what it sees. And that is based on, I mean, if you could talk about to what degree it's based on AI, but there is decisions being made and you can configure to actually take action, which is really interesting. There's a lot of security suites that are doing that as well as trying to predict what's actually happening and understand it. And the key is, it's one thing to identify traffic that shouldn't be there. The problem is in most cases, it's normal traffic. You're not, the biggest problem with ransomware is not because your computer was infected with virus, it's because I'm encrypting data, which is a normal function of Windows. So how do you determine what is normal encryption and intentional and ransomware? And that's not always easy, and AI is definitely, the vendors are working on building pattern recognition engines to actually pick that up and predict when it's actually happening. Citrix is kind of leveraging that as well by scoring the interaction compared to what normally happens. And so therefore, it's not just the encryption's running, but what is it encrypting and how long it's, things like that. So for example, I've seen the example with Citrix where it's not transferring files that's an issue, but if you're transferring files at 4 o'clock in the morning, you're doing, hundreds of gigs. Well, that's not normal for you. I'm assuming that's not normal for you, right? Because if it was, it wouldn't flag the engine. But if you normally transfer a couple of files and all of a sudden the system sees that you're transferring a lot of files, and that's very unusual, and then that increases your score. But maybe you haven't hit the threshold. But then it's also happening at a time of day when that's not normal for you to be working, or maybe you're in a different part of the world that you normally don't connect from. The AI engines will take a look at that, understand it, and then actually start taking action. So yeah, I think in the next couple of years, hopefully we're going to get ahead of this, because it's been this cat and mouse game where we improve the technology and then the hackers just get better, and it's a constant race. And we used to build everything based on signatures, and that is just ineffective at this point. So we have to get better at that, and the vendors are working on it. Vili, you probably can talk about that with the security analytics, right?
Certainly. So I mean, that goes back to it, right? And I think you did a great job of covering it. So I'll just add a short tidbit there. And right, it's the fact that we do leverage user risk scores. And so the AI is going to be the one that determines what threshold a user is currently on. And based on those scores, we humans, right, we will then determine what's going to happen at X threshold. So we set what the action item is going to be, and the AI is going to be the one that actually determines what score a particular user has based on all of the things that we've been discussing. So super quick, I did want to add one more thing to the current question that we have right around security. And so with Citrix, what if the user is trying to connect in from an environment that's already been compromised, right? So we do have additional securities that we can leverage, things like blocking keyloggers, right? Doing watermarking, and even preventing the actual screen for the Citrix application. I'm going to say application generally because that could be a SaaS application that's being delivered via our SPA or other security solutions, SIA2, or a virtualized app or desktop, right? So all of that will be covered under this additional enhancements that we're going to have on the endpoint. With SIA, right, the secure internet access, we are preventing more from what's happening to that end user, right? So if this end user is trying to navigate to a site that we either know is malicious and we haven't chosen to block it for some reason, or potentially it could be a site that we know the user needs to do. We know that there is a risk for the user accessing that site, but it's part of their job. Call it marketing in Facebook or marketing in all of social media, right? And so those are sites that we could say, hey, perfect, we know we want to get there, and then you have to get there. we're going to give you a containerized browser so that you could do that within this experience. Once you log off, that browser wasn't actually part of your local endpoint, and it's going to get thrown away. So whatever happened to it, if it got infected potentially, then that's all getting blown away, and it won't impact neither the endpoint or the company's infrastructure.
John, I think there's also a piece of the story that you can add, because the other component is, so you do have some issue with a computer, with an endpoint device that is in fact connected. And while we have all sorts of technology to block and protect and monitor performance on the server side, normally we're blind as to what's going on the end user devices, right? And ControlUp's got some very interesting technology that I find really unique. We love the integration, and I wanted to get your take on that, on monitoring and understanding what's happening on the end user's device, because a lot of times when there are security issues that are occurring, you can see it in performance logs if you know what you're looking at and if you have the visibility to it.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to come off as a security solution with ControlUp, but it does provide you with a lot of data and a lot of information about that end user. Just when you open up our main dashboard, you're going to see a map of the world showing you where all of your endpoints are, right? If you've deployed us to your endpoints, whether those be managed Windows devices, iGels, or unmanaged BYO devices that we can put a lightweight agent on, actually a plugin, we at least get some information about that endpoint and what's going on and where they're coming from, right? And a lot of times knowing that information is going to give you a lot more to start with, right? We can be actionable, we can set alerts, we can set off automation as well. We can trigger tickets to be created and sent to other teams based on user behavior or things that we see in the environment. So the solution will give you insights into what's going on real time. So especially if a user's having a particular problem, we'll be able to give you the information about what's going on in that end user session, the devices and all of the infrastructure that they're talking to as well. So the underlying Citrix infrastructure, for example, we're going to be able to see those things, the hypervisor and all the pieces that they're coming from, but also that last mile, right? Not only what device they're coming from, but what Wi-Fi they're coming from, all of those things. So there's a lot of information there.
Yeah, because normally we're blind. So we're in the data center, we're managing our infrastructure. I have no idea what you have at home. so I can't, you're telling me it's terrible. I'm looking, everything looks great on my side. And what we've been able to leverage is understanding the network health and what's happening on the network side of the endpoint device is usually an area that we're completely blind on because it's not our infrastructure.
And it's not only just given to the main admins like the Citrix admin, right? But you can also provide that information to the first level support folks, right? In either a read-only or actionable format, right? So as soon as that user calls in, you can pull that user up and see everything about that end user, where they're coming from, what devices they're touching, and all that stuff. So yeah, giving the visibility honestly gets you into troubleshooting a lot faster.
And it's interesting because a lot of people don't think about that from a security standpoint because it's not designed for that purpose. But the truth is, when we know there's a security issue or we even have a feeling, one of the telltale signs is network activity and network performance degradation and things like that. You see routers and switches and firewalls start having problems, right? Because they're being hit or being attacked, and you can see that if you know what to look for. And so a lot of times when there's something going on and you want to understand where is it, right? How far has it reached? You start looking at the entire environment as a whole. And so I thought it was an interesting question. And while not necessarily designed for that purpose from a security standpoint, is certainly one of the tools in your arsenal, because I think the more situational awareness and visibility we have, the better we can do our jobs.
Yep. And it's a fine line a lot of times with ControlUp, because yes, you can do just about anything you want with the product, because we can write scripts and take action and run them on the endpoint, things like that, with role-based access, by the way. But that information can also be consumed with other solutions. So if you're a security SIM, if you're running a Splunk environment or some other SIM in the environment that's collecting data and pulling that information in to be a security information, not only applications on the machine, patch levels, all that kind of stuff, we can also give you access to that from our backend, but also send it directly from the endpoint to those places too. So there's a lot of really good information to help the overall end user experience and management of those environments.
Okay, so let's check what the next question is. We went on, there's a lot of information for that one, so that's great. Okay, so the next question is a combo again, because they both have to do with Avaya. Has anyone used iGel with Avaya Workspace, one app via Citrix VDI and iGel OL successfully? How do we achieve Avaya 1X communicator audio improvement with VDI? So there's two questions, we kind of combine them together since it's the same topic.
Yeah, this is Ron. So basically, we work with Avaya as well as we do with Microsoft and WebEx, et cetera, and Zoom, et cetera. So Avaya, and what they've got there for the support with that. So you want to make sure you got the latest iGel OS, and then follow our configuration UCC guide for config and setup. We also have the iGel community, and we have about 9,000 members on that, and that's iGel. So if you Google iGel community, you can go in there and do a search on Avaya or ask a question in there, and usually within 10 or 12 minutes, you've got an answer to whatever question you have.
I think Robert can probably chime in here as well. With our experience, one of the nice things, at least with iGel, and obviously you have different types of clients, is that you have a lot of baked in or built-in agents that you can deploy on the device that will add some additional optimization to those specific applications, right? So there's Avaya optimization and Zoom optimization. Like you have a set of tools that can be used, and you can find that information there. It doesn't come necessarily out of the box, so there's a little research you need to do, but they spend a lot of time working on these big applications and platforms that most of us use to help us optimize it. And because you have that local partition, so you have the read-only partition, but then you also have a writable partition where you can actually make some modifications, and in many cases install some local drivers that actually will optimize that experience. The other factor, honestly, is the specific version that you're using of Avaya, because we get this a lot with different call centers and contact centers, and then it's not always a binary issue either. It's which features are you using? Because sometimes you can get it to work, but you can't get all the features to work, and that may be okay with you depending on your use case.
Yeah,
and then,
I
of course,
think
the
the
operating
modality.
system.
Yeah, with the modality that Avaya has, I mean, you could be in a control mode based where really it's not leveraging the audio video through it's not really using it as a true soft phone. It's really just a management for a physical phone that's sitting for the user, which you can certainly run it in that mode on a VDI, and it could still run, or you run it just as a typical soft phone, and Steve, like you were alluding to, they're really the optimal way of doing it, and it's sort of like a totem pole when it comes to soft phones. The top being, if the vendor themselves has a media engine that runs on the user device that allows the redirection and let the traffic flow peer-to-peer, is the most optimal way of running it with any VDI scenario. But going down that totem pole, you have some options where you could, let's say it's a one-off application that may not have that sort of optimization for VDI. Citrix also has its own built-in optimizations around, just in general with soft phones, to optimize the audio and maybe separate it from the ICA channel and let that run in a more optimal standpoint. And there's various areas to touch, whether it be the Citrix policies, or if you're running it through NetScalers, you can modify the NetScalers to allow it to run optimally. And at the very bottom, you still have even options where, particularly from a Citrix standpoint, which is a feature called local app access, where we've had some customers that just simply cannot get it to run optimally. The vendor for the soft phone doesn't provide a media engine, and at the same time, it's just too taxing to run it over ICA, that the application gets installed locally, but you can seamlessly deliver it into your virtual desktop session, where it seems as though it's in there, but it's really running locally, and that way it can run due to the requirements of whatever that particular application may be.
And the other piece from an iGel point of view that we have is like with Citrix, right? Citrix has an SDK So iGel, we tie into that to have our optimization, our H.264 compression, stuff like that, we add that into the SDK, follow the SDK from Citrix to add that in to optimize that. And then, John from ControlUp would be able to see the end-to-end user experience during that. So if a user calls and says, hey, I'm having audio or video, issues, you can look into that and say, okay, why is it every Thursday afternoon my Avaya calls, go to hell, go to crap, right? So, John, ControlUp can come in and look at that and look at what the root cause of that Thursday afternoon, hiccup is, right? So.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of that. We've actually expanded a lot on that around just unified communication. So I know Avaya was a specific question, but I think anytime you're talking about things like soft phones, unified communication, whether that be Teams, Zoom, Avaya, anytime that you're doing voice and video and screen sharing over a channel, especially a virtual channel, understanding that, and ControlUp's added a lot around that. So we can provide you visibility, not only what's going on the endpoint and in the session, but we also have ties into API calls into the back end. So I can go back and look at all of the Zoom calls in my organization from yesterday and Teams, and we're adding in additional solutions as well. But I can see the quality, I can see frames per second, I can see all of those things, not only real time, but in the historical sense, because a lot of tools fall short when you get to the point where you can only troubleshoot that real time. Well, it only happened during that meeting, and I can't get those same folks on the line. So how can I go back historically?
Like what happened Thursday afternoon in my example, right? When that ticket comes in, they can go back to Thursday afternoon and see exactly what triggered that event, right?
You're also tracking latency, which is really important in real-time communication like voice. I mean, these are great examples, by the way, of what we started the conversation with around the fact that you guys as a group worked very hard together to make sure that the products are optimized and work together. That integration becomes key, in all three of these vendors are phenomenal as part of your toolkit. And I guess obviously the answer to the question is yes. If you guys need some help doing this, reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you.
So I haven't talked on this question, and I'm going to say something super short. Please, and it's not directly related to the question, EDT, Enlightened Data Transport, is the new way of delivering the Citrix protocol. It improves the end user experience for anyone connecting in remotely. If I were to oversimplify my answer, it makes the user experience, at least from a bandwidth consumption perspective, for those remote users, be as close to matching what it would be if you were on the internal network, right? Because it enables us to go past the TCP limitations, especially when there's latency in the way, to actually deliver what the user is expecting to receive instead of a very, very throttled back version of what they're actually doing.
Okay.
Okay. Next question, and just a heads up for the panelists, we have about 10 minutes left. What are the advantages to ControlUp offer over its competitors?
Sure, I guess I'll take that one. So I mean, yeah, I'll talk about it in a couple different ways, two different ways, right? One is what are you using ControlUp for, and understanding what ControlUp is, the solution's built for, and ControlUp's built for digital user experience management, right? I think in the past it's been a VDI monitoring solution, right? And that was pretty much what it did. It gave you some insights, which the same information is available in Director and other places on your consoles, right? But what ControlUp really does, and why ControlUp has become so successful and where we live, is it's not only a monitoring but also a management tool for end users. So we are very end user centric. So we look at the end user session and determine where they're sitting, whether that's in the virtual channel in VDI, or it's on a physical endpoint, managed or unmanaged. And from there, then you can not only understand what's going on in the session, both real time and historically, but also being able to take actions, be able to automate responses on the endpoints and those sessions for those end users, and give your support personnel a full picture of what's going on in that user session. In the past, I've struggled personally, both as an sysadmin as well as an architect, trying to identify my end users and what's going on in their worlds, and trying to get a good picture of what's going on across the board. and ControlUp does a really good job of that. So, I mean, I can definitely expand upon all kinds of features and functions and all that stuff, right? But ControlUp provides a very, very great insight into your environment and gives you actionable information that your support folks and administrators can take upon those sessions and make sure that your end user is having a good experience. And on the other side of that is it gives you a lot of information about your environment that you're managing. So coming from an architect standpoint or a sysadmin standpoint of, hey, why are my users complaining? You know, it's usually, hey, it's the network guy, it's the Citrix guy, it's whoever it is. Well, now we have all of the information to tell you what's really going on. And then as an organization, you can then decide, where should we focus, right? And over the last few years, I mean, talk about the explosion of work from home. There's so many variables. You don't get to control everything within your walls anymore. So understanding what's going on in those end user sessions is very, very important. So, you know, I'd love to give the opportunity to stop talk. I can talk for days and days about ControlUp and why I love it. I was on the partner side and I've been architecting virtual environments for years. I've been using ControlUp for years, and it's given me one of the best insights into not only identifying good use cases for VDI and virtualized environments, but also sizing and management of those environments. So from the very, very beginning of identifying what's going to happen in my environment, who's good fit for my virtual workspace, to implementing and then ongoing management and carrying and feeding of that environment.
Okay, this might be the last question. We'll see if we can squeeze one more in, but this next one is, describe the process and tools to optimize and troubleshoot end user experience. How would you troubleshoot a user who's not able to access a shared drive?
And I'll start on this one if you don't mind, and then we can, I'm sure everyone has some things to say about this too, but number one, it's visibility, understanding what's going on. So without visibility, you can't really do much more troubleshooting until you're going to remote into that end user session. So getting visibility and making a determination on how to handle that call. You know, I talk about folks a lot of times get a first response from an end user, and it takes them 10 or 12 minutes just to find out what's going on in that environment. When they can instantly pull up a dashboard and see what's going on in that end user session, see everything that it's connected to, then they can start making real troubleshooting adjustments from there. As far as shared drives, I think that's just one component within the environment, right? You can tell where they're coming from, what their latency looks like, what users logging in, all of those things. So a lot of it's just about visibility. And then you can then take action on troubleshooting.
Okay, maybe another question. We have a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That was quick. Any tips for accessing on-prem file shares from DAS VDI?
So that's Citrix naming convention there. So I'll jump on to this one. I mean, we could certainly map network shares, right, as part of the session. So that is definitely the quickest one. I will also add, right, we do have content collaboration, previously known as share file, as an option as well, right? It's a file sync and share solution that will enable us to create and actually map the drive as a network share if that was something that you wanted to do. So you'd have access to that from any device, right? It doesn't actually have to be part of the virtualized session. We can enable this on any type of endpoint so that they can have access to back into the corporate environment. And then obviously, right, from a security perspective, we can make sure that access to it is going to be secure from that perspective. But that would be right. Either we map it into the Citrix session as one of the network shares that they have enabled on that logon, or via leveraging a solution like content collaboration would be the first two things that come to mind on a Citrix side.
You know, it's interesting. I'm sure Robert might chime in here, but I think the first thing you really need to do is get it off a Windows file server. If that's what you've got in your infrastructure, because that's how we built things in the past, right? We put everything on file servers. The thing is, those were designed mostly to work on a local area network. And even if you had a WAN, it wasn't really designed to work over the internet with high latency and lots of hops. And so if you are dealing with larger files, then all of a sudden that becomes a big issue for your user experience. And so there are web-based solutions like content and collaboration, SharePoint. There's all sorts of new strategies on how we securely store and access our files, and even the different types of files. You have different ways of managing them. So like audio video files, for example, don't need to be handled the same way as a Word or Excel document would. And to start thinking about more modern options instead of using old file servers. And so the question doesn't specifically talk about how to get it off file servers, but when I think about most of our customers that are trying to transition into a DaaS platform, so they're moving into a more modern deployment, it's one of the things they have to adjust from because they're used to conventional, infrastructure.
Yeah,
So
and
I'm
I would
seeing
say,
a lot.
it generally is all in stages, and it depends on what stage you're at and maybe your move to the cloud, for example. And Vilio gave some good examples on how you would leverage that with Citrix and being able to make that move into the VDI, but obviously the data is maybe that's your next phase, and you need a sort of a solution at that point in time until you introduce a way to now maybe replicate the data into where your VDI are going to be, because overall goal is to keep low latency between the VDI environment and where your data is sitting. And so I think that's a good approach. There's no right way necessarily to do that, but I think that some of the tips, at least from that initial stage that Avilio gave, is good.
Right. I think really leveraging, if you're a Microsoft shop, you would leverage, SharePoint, OneDrive, right? Have that set up. If you're Google, you'd have Google Docs, stuff like that, and that stuff would kind of move in that way, right? Have those file shares and stuff then close to, your back-end infrastructure, So if you're in Google or if you're in Microsoft, have the data sitting there as well, right? And then it's just quick access and all in the same place, right?
That's an excellent point. The other thing from a tips perspective, and it's too detailed to get into it here, but you can definitely reach out to us, is that when you are going to leverage the technologies and you start leveraging, maybe you're moving profile data, you're redirecting your folders in your environment, like your documents, desktops, things like that. There are exclusions to that. There, like everything else, there's tuning and optimization to redirection and to replication, because it is not a one size fits all. And when you do that, you end up with very inconsistent experiences. If you tune it correctly, then you can leverage the technology to optimize the situation, because sometimes the data is in a different location, and you're not using that scenario where you're solving the problem the same way for all scenarios. You're looking at the specific files that actually need to work at a higher performance level, and you might treat those differently than other types of files that you need access to but are not used on a regular basis or every time you log in. So it's kind of a complicated answer, but the good thing is that there are best practices for this and strategies depending on how your topology is set up.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Just really quick, Steve, if someone has more questions or has follow-up further question didn't get answered, they can reach out to us. Does Forthright do like an assessment or health check on environments to help people kind of see where their issues are?
We absolutely do. I mean, obviously, we can come in and help you on specific issues that you're having. There are two types of health checks that are kind of formalized for us that will come in. One of them is very structured and has a very specific deliverable, and sometimes that's necessary, especially for very large environments. Whether it's I'm doing an annual or maybe it's an audit every 2 years that we might do, an optimization audit, or sometimes it's, hey, just come in and do a workshop. I don't need all the heavy documentation, but I do need a couple of days, take a look at our environment, work with our team, and work through on the various things that we're seeing where we can continue to optimize what you currently have, whether we're identified and we're looking at a specific problem that you bring up, or you just, hey, I'd like to know how we can make it better. Where are the opportunities, right, for optimization or better security, and we'll set up a workshop with your team. So that's definitely something we can do.
Okay, great. I'd just like to wrap stuff up. First, I'm going to announce the winners of the raffle. We have 3 winners. They are Paul Bardfield, Cliff Kennedy, and Ernesto Galban. So I will reach out to you about selecting and receiving your prizes. Congratulations. Everyone else, including them, are getting a free lunch, and I will send you the credits for that. If you don't hear from me by the end of the day tomorrow, just email marketing@forthright.com and I can figure out what happened there. And then we'll be following up with you if your question didn't get answered today. And on behalf of the entire Forthright team and our panelists from Control Up, iGel, and Citrix, I'd like to thank you for your time this afternoon. Have a great day. Thank you.
All right, thanks all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.